So as I said, today what I wanted to talk about was blindness, and the series we're thinking about is Christians behaving badly. And I'll remind you again that what we're talking about is us. We're talking about our own behaviour. When I talk about or think about the idea of blindness and I turn to the Word, I'm really spoilt for choice again in terms of the Bible passages available to us. So I read part of 2, John chapter 9, the man born blind, very, very famous miracle that the Lord performed. Isaiah 29, also a reasonably well-known passage about blindness, but there are many others. Psalm 146 is well worth reading. Isaiah 56 is also worth reading. Jesus on many occasions talks about blindness. That one occasion of the man born blind is not the only healing of blindness the Lord performs. And in Revelation chapter 3, the letter to the church of Laodicea also mentions blindness. So there's a great many passages through the entire Bible that concern themselves with blindness. What I want to talk about today is what is called in the teachings of the church falsity of evil. Falsity of evil. And there's a very important lesson in this for us. Now, I don't know whether you've had opportunity to try and wade your way through passages that Swedenborg writes about falsity of evil. And it can be difficult for us to grasp these double-barreled terms. So I just want to explore it a little bit and explain it to you. I think it is very important and well worth our grasping. So Swedenborg often writes in terms of good and evil, falsity and truth. Now, if I were to take any one of those terms on its own, we'd have some sense of what it means. We've had some grasp of it. But then Swedenborg combines them, and we get terms like the good of truth or the truth of good, and we get the evil of falsity and the falsity of evil, and we're left kind of staggering around wondering what these mean. What is he talking about when he speaks about these terms? Well, let's explore it a little bit. We have a mind, and a mind which is made up of two sides. We call them the will and the understanding. Now, the will is the seat of our desires, our affections, our loves. And it is capable of receiving what is good from the Lord. However, it receives a lot of other things as well. An example I'll give you is ice cream. So I like ice cream, so I call ice cream good. Don't I? We say it is good because it appeals to us. Of course, the other side of that is to realise that a lot of ice cream is not good for us. And so I can have this idea that ice cream is good, it appeals to me, it awakens a desire for more, but actually to have more is not good, and we understand the consequences of having too much ice cream in lots of different ways. So it shows us also that the will, aside from being able to receive what is good, is also able to receive what is evil, what is bad for us, what has negative consequences. So that's the will side. Now, the understanding side is our learning, our knowledge, our intellect, our memory, the things that we know. And it can receive what is true from the Lord. Now, I think of truth as understanding reality the way that it is. That's how I think of truth. Okay? Understanding reality the way that it is. But what happens is that if I love ice cream, my will bends my understanding to a particular understanding about ice cream. I see I develop a belief that ice cream will make me happy, which of course is not true. In small amounts perhaps, but a large quantity is going to be bad for me. So the understanding is capable of receiving falsity just as much as it is capable of receiving truth. So we have these two sides of us. Okay? One receives what is good or evil, and one receives what is true or what is false. But what Swedenborg offers us is the idea, the understanding that there's a relationship between these two sides of our mind, you see. And we see this in the ice cream example. If I love ice cream, my will imposes that upon my understanding, and my understanding gathers reasons why I should have more ice cream. You see? This is the relationship between these two sides of our mind, between good on the one hand and truth on the other, or evil on the one hand and falsity on the other. They interact with one another. There's what Swedenborg calls a marriage between the two. So one will naturally gravitate towards the other. So goodness naturally gravitates towards truth. Evil naturally gravitates towards falsity, and the reverse is also true. A couple of weeks ago, I became aware of an interesting set of advertisements for a diet program. Now, some of you may have seen this. I'm not going to mention what the program is, but it centres around this man, and it starts to unpack why he has an unhealthy weight, why he has a weight problem. And it focuses upon the idea that as a child, he was taught you should always eat everything that's on your plate. You see? Now, I know I've taught my children that you should always eat everything that's on your plate. But in this particular case, this man has taken it in and it's become an unhealthy habit for him. It's led him always to eat everything he's given, irrespective of whether he needs it or not. And so there's various footage, there's video of him sitting at a restaurant and chatting away with friends. You know, the waiter comes to take his plate away. He says, "Oh no, I've got to finish it. I've got to finish it." And it illustrates the way that a particular belief will lead us in a certain direction. And so falsity, if we have something that is false in our minds, it will lead us towards unhealthy consequences. Now, that is an illustration of what Swedenborg calls the evil of falsity. The evil of falsity. Now, I find it useful to use the word from instead of, because it gives you a direction. Evil from falsity. So a false belief which leads in a particular unhealthy direction. Now, one of the things that Swedenborg tells us is it's possible to do that quite sincerely. To have an unhealthy belief, but to hold it in good conscience and so be led in that particular direction. And Swedenborg says spiritually that has no consequence for us, other than it leads us to do something that is not good. So an example we might have is the jihadist, the Muslim jihadist who, being indoctrinated with the idea of jihad and being told how righteous it is, goes about killing people and judging them based on this principle that is sincerely held of the jihad. So we can be led to all sorts of evil actions as a result of sincerely holding a belief that is wrong. And that is evil from falsity, the evil of falsity. You see how there's a relationship between the two. The problem with that, of course, is if we then learn to love the evil, we then become judged for that. So you think of that jihadist. if that jihadist begins with that, sense of righteousness in their jihad, but then comes to love the act of killing or torture or whatever it is of others, that is a spiritual problem. So it's always worth our while getting our sense of reality as accurate as possible. The other side of the coin is falsity of evil. And this is a wholly different matter. So let's put that word from in. Falsity from evil. The falsity from evil is when our will bends our understanding to itself. It is the evil that we're centred on. It's the desire that we're centred on, and we twist our understanding to confirm what we love. And we call this willful blindness. Willful blindness. That is the falsity of evil. It's I do not see because I do not want to see. And you can see that that's in a whole other category. There's no sincerity involved in this case. And there's no persuading anybody because they are wholly consumed with that evil that they desire. So then we go to the Word and we find passages like Isaiah chapter 5, which I know I've used before. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. That sounds like a very judgmental statement of the Lord. But in reality, what it is, it's actually laying out the state of someone's life. If you call evil good and good evil, you are not in a good spiritual place. And you can see that very clearly. And that's what that statement is about. It's the blindness that Jesus criticises the Pharisees and the teachers of the law for. Blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel, he says. We see it in the desire later in John's Gospel of the teachers of the law who seek to kill Lazarus, because Lazarus represents the living proof of the power of the Lord. They seek to get rid of the evidence. It's the blindness spoken of in Revelation chapter 3, when we hear the Lord say, "Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked." And we see the difference between just having a false belief or having this falsity from evil in our lives in what we heard in John, in Jesus' statement when he says, "For judgment I have come into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may be made blind." Now, one of our problems is we tend to think, when we talk this term evil and falsity, particularly evil, we tend to think in big terms. We tend to think of evil as being murder, child abuse, enslavement, fraud, all those big, the things you would be put in front of a court of law and tried for. That's what we think of when we talk about evil. But evil has a much more subtle meaning for us. Evil encapsulates all those little things that we do that we should do differently. And little small deeds in our everyday lives. That's what we're talking about when we speak about evil. Not just these grand big things. So I wanted to share with you an example from my own life. I realised several years ago about myself that I am my most frustrated with other people when I myself actually subconsciously am trying to avoid doing something. I first encountered this in ministry back in Canberra. That just getting riled up and rattled up about, going to a board meeting and saying, I want you to understand we need to do X, Y, and Z. And of course, just meeting a blank wall. And just in self-reflection, I realised what was going on was that I myself had something in my mind that I knew I had to do. But the fact that I could see that reluctance out there in someone else was giving me opportunity to shift the blame. And so my frustration, which I should have felt with myself, I was feeling with others and expressing with others. It provided me with a convenient excuse, if you like. It let me off the hook. And I recognised there was a kind of a satisfaction in it, in a strange sort of a way. That is a falsity derived from evil. Now you might say, David, that's not that bad, is it really? But that's exactly my point. It's the little evils. It's the ones we excuse. It's the ones we explain away to ourselves that we really need to, get in there and do some work on. You see, every evil, if it's recognised as evil at all, in the eyes of the perpetrator, will be explained away as not that big, not that much of a deal, not that much of a problem. And that is a falsity of evil, a falsity from evil. It is willful blindness. So we address our evils by going after the small ones, the little things that we do that we should do better. And the thing is, those little things are what hold us back from our God-given potential. If we're able to address those little things, who knows what we might be able to achieve? I'm going to share with you now a passage from Heaven and Hell. And Swedenborg begins he's going in a different direction, but he comes back to this idea, and I think it's so important what he says. So have a listen to this. Heaven and Hell, 487. Only from a knowledge of correspondences can it be known into what spiritual delights everyone's natural delights are changed after death, and what kind of delights they are. In general, this knowledge teaches that nothing natural can exist without something spiritual corresponding to it. In particular, it teaches what it is that corresponds and what kind of thing it is. Therefore, anyone who has this knowledge can ascertain and know what his own state after death will be. If he only knows what his love is, and what its relation is to the universally ruling loves spoken of above, to which all loves have relation. But it is impossible for those who are in the love of self to know what their ruling love is, because they love what is their own, and call their evils goods. And the falsities to which they incline and by which they confirm their evils, they call truths. And yet, if they were willing, they might know it from others who are wise, and who see what they themselves do not see. This, however, is impossible with those who are so enticed by the love of self that they spurn all teaching from the wise. On the other hand, those who are in heavenly love accept instruction, and as soon as they are brought into the evils into which they were born, they see them from truths, for truths make evils manifest. From truth, which is from good, anyone can see evil and its falsity, but from evil, none can see what is good and true, and for the reason that falsities of evil are darkness and correspond to darkness. Consequently, those who are in falsities from evil are like the blind, not seeing the things that are in light, but shunning them instead like owls. But as truth from good are light and correspond to light, so those who are in truths from good have sight and open eyes, and discern the things that pertain to light and shade. This too has been proved to me by experience. The angels in heaven both see and perceive the evils and falsities that sometimes arise in themselves. Also the evils and falsities in spirits, in the world of spirits, who are connected with the hells, although the spirits themselves are unable to see their own evils and falsities. Such spirits have no comprehension of the good of heavenly love, of conscience, of honesty and justice, except such as is done for the sake of self, neither of what it is to be led by the Lord. They say that such things do not exist, and thus are of no account. All these things have been said to the intent that man may examine himself and may recognize his love by his delights, and thus, so far as he can make it out from a knowledge of correspondences, may know the state of his life after death. So I just want to take my challenges for the week for you from the passage that we've just heard. I wonder how you react to the teaching of the wise, as he talks about. Do you accept instruction from others? Do you examine yourself fearlessly? Do you see the evils and falsities present within yourself? And what is your reaction to them? And I wonder whether you notice towards the end of that passage where he's talking about the angels of heaven. And notice that he says the evils and falsities present in the angels of heaven. The only difference between the angels and those in hell is whether they recognize those evils and falsities or not. So it's a big challenge for us to do this, but realize that seeing your evils and falsities does not condemn you to hell. Not seeing them does.